sun is our country, healing our past, improving our lives, and energizing our potential. Together, our constitution, our people, our parliament, and our country are building our great South African nation. Parliament TV, channel 408 on DSTV. This book, our constitution, protects our society and empowers us to govern. The Protea leaves are us, the people, who freely elect our voices in Parliament. The drum calls the
Good
people
afternoon
of
and
Parliament.
welcome to Parliament TV. I am Shirley Munso and coming to you live from the City Hall in Cape Town itself, the Western Cape Province. Today, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, will table the medium-term budget policy statement to the National Assembly at 2 p.m. The medium-term budget policy statement sets government policy goals and priorities, forecast macroeconomic trajectory, and project the fiscal framework over the next 3 years by outlining spending and revenue estimates, amongst others. But before the Minister of Finance tables the medium-term budget policy statement, or mini budget, which we normally say this afternoon, we are going to be giving you a better understanding of the significance of the MTBPS and hear from the chairpersons in the finance cluster about the significance of the whole budget process, and as well hear where the MTBPS fits in that process. Don't forget to join us on our social media platforms at Parliament of RSA. Our hashtag for today is @MTBPS 2022. Please follow us. We will also speak to some of the key role players in the planning, the monitoring and oversight of the budget. So do stay tuned. For now, let's have a look at the whole budget process to better understand where a medium-term budget policy statement fits in this process, as we said. Nearly gave me a fright. That lady nearly gave me a fright.
The budget reflects the choices that government has to make, and it is the tool it uses to achieve its economic and development goals. In the budget, government sets out what it's going to spend and the income it collects, which it needs to finance its expenditure. The government has to balance a wide range of legitimate demands with limited resources at its disposal. Budget oversight is intended to help government move forward to realize its goals by increasing government's accountability to its citizens. The budget process occurs over a period of about 18 months. The budget of any financial year undergoes a 4-stage process. The stages are drafting, planning and formulation, the legislative process, implementation, as well as auditing and assessment. Parliament and government departments plan the budget for months in advance for the following year, implementing the current budget while continuously monitoring it for delivery and compliance with policy, and evaluating and auditing the previous year's budget. During the legislative phase of the budget, the National Assembly, the National Council of Provinces, and the provincial legislatures debate budget votes with the involvement of interest groups and civil society, the media, and the general public. This is to ensure that they reflect national priorities and accommodate outcomes and actions required by the mid-term strategic framework. It is important to measure the effectiveness of public spending and the manner in which public resources are spent. The more immediate goals are to ensure that government budget priorities are consistent with the declared policy objectives and that the financial resources allocated to priority areas are spent fully and properly. However, a larger purpose of the budget process is to contribute to democracy through ensuring openness, transparency, and accountability for public resources. Parliament, following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better.
You are watching Parliament TV live from Cape Town City Hall again. And if ever, I just want to remind you, if ever you are joining us, this is a build-up to the medium-term budget policy statement 2022. As said, the Minister of Finance will be here at the City Hall presenting the MTBPS today to the National Assembly. The medium-term budget also does several things, as some would say, but it plays a critical role in the entire budgetary process because it sets the tone for the fiscal framework for the next national budget. The fiscal framework refers to the broad budgetary aggregates of total revenue, expenditure, borrowing for a given year. It also allows government departments to apply for adjustments to their budgets, apply for rollovers, and request additional funds for unforeseeable and unavoidable expenditure. It indicates how government intends allocating the upcoming national budget. Again, the mid-term budget also includes information on spending estimates for the first half of the current year, any adjustment to spend on the proposed revenue and spending estimates for the second half of the current year. Outcomes for the previous year are also included. The chairperson of the Standing Committee on Appropriations, Ndade, I call him Ndade Sfiso Buthelezi, is with me now to give us even more understanding on the significance of the MTBPS in the overall budget process and the implications of this on his committee. Ndade Buthelezi, we haven't seen one another for some time. Welcome to Parliament TV.
Thank you. Good afternoon to you, Shelley.
Good afternoon, sir.
To Parliament television viewers. Good afternoon.
Sir. And we are nearing the end of the 6th administration. And there is a consensus that we are agreeing upon to say that, COVID-19 has shifted the thinking, even including budgeting for the country. So what are the key policy priorities that you expect to shape this adjustment budget?
Let me start by wishing the Minister of Finance, Honorable Enoch Godongwana, and Team Finance well as they present the midterm budget policy statement under very, very difficult conditions. We always say difficult conditions, but they seem not to be improving. The conditions are becoming more and more challenging. So just to say to them, all of the best with the budget. It's a very delicate balancing, we know. Perhaps as you are saying that we are coming from a COVID shock, which just came from nowhere, and we needed to adjust a number of things. You know, a lot of legislations, a lot of adjustments had to come before Parliament to try and react to what COVID-19 was presenting to us. But the biggest disturbance was its disturbance to the economy.
Yes.
You know that we were locked down where nothing was moving, and that has had a lot of impact on the performance of the economy and the ripple negative effects on unemployment, on poverty and inequality. So all those indicators just went the wrong direction.
Yes.
So what are the expectations? The expectations are then saying that whatever type of intervention that the minister will be making must talk to how do we reignite the economy, must talk to how do we include all South Africans, irrespective of their race, irrespective of their gender or creed, so that all of us put the shoulder to the wheel and make sure that we become part of the rebuilding of our economy. So we'd like to see that. Would like to hear the minister saying, because you know what has happened apart from COVID.
Yes.
We know now that we have got what we'll call an external shock to the economy, the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine. It has had a big impact, not just on our economy, but on the global economy per se. We have seen it, for instance, when it comes to us with what has happened, for instance, to the fuel price. As you know, when it comes to the fuel price, again, it has got a lot of negative ripple effects to the economy.
Yes.
Yes, it affects our spending, it increases the cost of living, traveling, you name them.
Yes, as members of the global economy.
Exactly, as members of the, so we have seen that. So I'm therefore saying that our expectation is that those who are on the margins, the poorest of the poor, the most vulnerable, are even in a worse situation. So we would like to hear what the minister is saying about that, the proverbial safety net. What are we doing to try and catch those people who are most affected? As you know, that before, the government has intervened in many ways. You know the SRD grant, the 350 grant,
Yes,
which initially was supposed to be just a one-year intervention. But government came in and said it was extending to make sure that at least people have got a plate on the table. So that was a proper intervention. But we then extended that by another year, costing the fiscus about 44 billion rand per annum, right? So that again, the intervention of government. So we would like to hear what is the minister saying about that. But again, because I'm talking about how are we responding to these things, or how should government respond, or what to expect the government to do. Yes. And some of these things are not the new things. So want to see what is the way forward. At the beginning of the year, you know that we spoke about the presidential employment stimulus, which was again an intervention from the fiscus, from parliament, to say let's have some employment opportunities being created, mainly for young people, for women and people living in townships and the rural areas. So again, would like to hear what is happening on that program and what is the thinking of the minister going forward.
But also, Deputy Lacy, how does then Parliament make the executive address these and monitor them towards making sure that whatever that has been budgeted for is well spent, and what would be really the outcomes, so that as well we do know, because the people speak, and then the people will point fingers at whoever and so on. And I think maybe more education needs to be done, though Parliament is doing so much to do oversight and public participation. But I would love to ask you this one, as to say that there are those that fall in cracks, or through the cracks. Then the country will experience such challenges. What does the committee and Parliament do for that?
I think the biggest intervention by Parliament, first through its committees, whether it's finance committees, both in the National Assembly and in the NCOP, or whether it's through the Standing Committee on Appropriations in both houses. First and foremost is to make sure that the resources are made available to people who must go and spend and make those interventions.
Yes.
So as you know that year in, year out, Parliament has never failed to do that.
Yes.
So we've made resources available. Let me just touch on this one, that when the Minister of Finance presents a budget to Parliament, when the Minister of Finance presents MTBPS to Parliament, it's a proposal to Parliament that as the executive, that's the route that we think we should follow. So, as you know, that budget will go to the finance committees and also go to the appropriation committees, where we get into this thing and look into it and so on behalf of Parliament. And then there are many processes involved, including calling the departments themselves to come and say, you say you want more money, but you didn't spend your money in the last
allocated year. Time frame,
but you still want more money. Or right now, what we'll be saying, we have got 2 terms that have been reported on, right, about the expenditures and so on. As Parliament, through the many committees, the portfolio committees, ourselves and so on, we must also be interrogating that. How
Yes.
have you fared in the past two quarters, Q1 2022 and Q2 2022? How have you fared, right? Because we need to interrogate that, because it's easy to ask for more money, but when you look at spending, and again, not just spending, quality spending, are we getting value for money for what we are getting? And the only way for us to measure whether we are getting value for money, that the people of South Africa, through their parliament, appropriate, is for the people to see what is happening to their lives. Is there improvement in their lives? Are we seeing more people getting employed? Are we seeing more people at least being able to get into the shop through the grants that we give, right? So it's very important that we see those things. So through the committees, I said, first, we do appropriate money and give to the department to go, or to the agencies, to the SOEs to go and do what they are supposed to do. So we do that. That's one part. But it doesn't end there. We also have got a responsibility to say, through oversight, our oversight responsibility, to say, have you done what you have promised? Not just Parliament, not just the committee, what you have promised the people of South Africa that you will be doing. So we do that through oversight. You know, there are many BRRRs and the reports that are being made to other committees.
Yes, and Deputy Lady, just talking about that one, I want to say that how also, so that this, whatever that has been approved by Parliament through this proposal by the Minister, do you think then there is capacity? And then what does the committee do to address these issues relating to capacity in terms of implementing these key financial priorities?
Yeah. You know, when we allocate money, you'll find that there's a skills development, there's money which goes to education, both basic and the TVETs, money which goes to the School of Government and so on, and to the departments and for training. So that responsibility primarily lies with the departments themselves, because when we allocate money, the assumption that we're having is that the people who are there are able to use that money and use it correctly. We don't sit on committees which appoint people who are going to be employed in government. We don't sit in those. This is the responsibilities of the executive authority and chief executive officers and so on and so forth. It's not our response. So we always assume from our side that because we pay for those people, right, that when they employ the best of the best.
Yes.
And as government, our wish is that government doesn't become the employer of last resort. It becomes the employer of first resort.
Yes.
So everyone wants to go and work for our government. So that's very important. And so we do make resources available. But as whether there is capacity and so on, we only see it through the results.
Yes.
When we see that the results are not coming out as they've been intended,
As expected, yes.
then we start saying there is capacity problems. In fact, some of the ministers have admitted that there are challenges of capacity.
Yes.
And we'll say to them as Parliament, please go back and deal with that, so that we make sure that the money that's appropriated, because, you know, budget is contested, right? So if we give you money, you must know that the other departments are not getting that money, is coming to you.
Yes.
So the expectations from Parliament and from the people of South Africa is that you use that money efficiently and optimally.
Yes.
So I'm just saying, perhaps let me add this one, because
Yes.
Parliament has raised this one, especially my
Your
committee.
Yes.
The under expenditure on infrastructure. It's a big worry. It's a big worry because it's there, under expenditure on infrastructure. There are agencies, let me tell you, there are agencies which have underspent by 14 billion rand.
Wow.
You understand? And that's unacceptable, right? Because looking at the bigger macroeconomic situation, if you underspend by 14 billion rand, you know what you have done? First and foremost, you have denied the people of the service.
Yes.
That's the big one. But it doesn't end there. We are running a deficit in this country, meaning that the revenue, that expenditure is bigger than revenue. So we go out to the market and borrow money, right? So that we can give to your department, you can give to your agents, we can give to this SOE.
Yes.
And we borrow at a higher interest rate. So if we go out, we borrow money, we give you money, you don't make use of that money, it means you are increasing our debt as a country.
As a country, yes.
We are increasing our debt service cost, increasing our debt service costs as a country. But we are denying other departments money that they would have used properly.
Yes.
So it is a big worry. And in infrastructure, another worry is that, as you know, that the government and the president has said that many times, that our economy has been sluggish for many years, since the global economic crisis, 2008, 2009.
Yes.
Has been very sluggish. And we identified infrastructure as something which is going to help both public and private sector to kickstart, to reignite the economy.
Yes.
So if you don't do that, if you don't spend, it means, one, we are shortchanging the people of South Africa as far as reigniting of the economy is concerned.
And lives are not changing.
The lives are not changing, but we are also shortchanging the people of South Africa as far as employment creation is concerned. Also shortchanging SARS, the revenue, about the revenue that they would have collected if that money was used, and you had businesses, both small and big, getting those businesses.
Yes.
So it has got a big implication. So this question that you are raising, the question of the skills and the right skills,
capacity,
we have said, and capacity. We have said one of the things that we are identifying is a question of project management skills,
Yes.
right? Which is very important for infrastructure. But project management is just good for everything. Even yourself as a person, you must project manage yourself.
Yes.
If you don't do
Yes.
that, you'll come late at work
Definitely.
and so on. Your children will be late at school. So it's very important that people should be, these project management skills are very critical for us to be able to achieve what we have said we want to achieve. So we've also identified that. But we do put resources as Parliament for people to address that.
Okay, indeed, sir. And then how has the committee ensured that the adjustment budget and the ongoing focus of the budget, that priorities is given to the implementation of the ERRP, particularly in relation to industrialization and to expand employment opportunities? Because we are looking at the youth now. You know, the youth are crying for employment.
The economic reconstruction and recovery plan, as was tabled by the president,
yes.
in Parliament, is about precisely what we've been talking about, reigniting the economy. But what does that involve? For instance, we are saying, let's stop importing things that we can do ourselves. Let's invest in the skills here. We rather import skills and do those things here, right? Because when we import a little bit of economics speak, if you look at the aggregate demand curve, import contributes negatively to the GDP. It's a negative. So everything that you import, you must know that its impact on the economy is negative.
Yes.
That's one.
Yes.
But two, importing things is equivalent to exporting jobs.
Yes.
We are exporting jobs to where those things are being manufactured at. So one of the central things when it comes to ERRP is localization and industrialization.
Yes.
Let's do those things ourselves. So that's very critical. So we are encouraging departments. We always ask them that, okay, you as a department, you have got this money through the budget. How are we helping ERRP? How are we helping localization? How are we helping black economic empowerment? You know that we've got the history in this country of the majority of people of this country being put on the margins, being made spectators in their economy.
Yes.
So we always say in the departments that this ERRP, because we want to, when it comes to ERRP, things must be done differently, right? And doing things differently means also amongst, let's look at industrialization and localization and giving people who had never had opportunities before, opportunities to participate in the economy.
Okay, and also looking at the past few months, the first half that we are now receiving an MTBPS, of. do you think, where has the main or most budget been spent, looking at departmental expenditure? And do you think for the coming 3 years, this will follow the same trajectory?
Yeah. We always say about 60% of our budget, of our expenditure, of consolidated expenditure, goes to what we call a social wage.
Yes.
So that would include your health, that will include your housing, that will include your education, amongst others. The things which are meant to benefit the majority of the people, the things which are having the biggest impact on the lives of the people. Health, when you're dealing with health and so on, you want our people to have access to that. And you know that we had, again, to come up with special appropriations budget to deal with COVID in the previous year. So that's where most of the budget has gone to. About 60% has gone to what we call the social wage, right? And there are reasons for that. For instance, if we invest in education, we're investing into the future of our children, because that's where you're going to get your engineers, that's where you're going to get your electricians, that's where you're going to get your doctors, that's where you're going to get your teachers, your nurses, you name them. So that's very important that we do that. Hence, our investment in what we call a human capital, which is investing in our people. So a lot of money has gone to that. But we have said that's not enough. A lot also when it comes to social development, right? It's one of the biggest components of our expenditure. People always say, no, it's a consumption budget. But let's look at it this way. The people that we give grants, we say the propensity for them to spend, it's huge, right?
Yes.
The chances are about 90% of that money is going to be spent. It's going to be spent on bread. It's going to be spent on meal, potatoes, and so on. And those things are produced somewhere. A certain farmer is benefiting from that. So the cycle. So this thing that you say, no, when you as if that money you give it to this person is going to,
And then
is not going to. It goes back to the economy. Yes, it goes to the economy. And again, you are mentioning this one. Those companies which are producing those things and they make profit, then you have got the revenue, SARS, have to go and tax them. So we need to be a little bit broad when we look at these things. I know there are those who say, no, don't spend. There's no way. That money still goes and benefits the private sector, so to speak.
And then say the inputs, just as and when we will be wrapping up soon now, just the communities you do oversight, as we said at the beginning, ordinary citizens also make some inputs. Do you think this budget adjustment will accommodate their inputs?
Shelley, I said to you, when it comes to the SRD grant, the 350,
yes,
the intention there was to say is for 1 year.
Yes.
But because of these inputs, we are a participatory democracy. We encourage our people to have inputs into how they are being governed, in how the budget is being spread. So the very fact that the 350 grant was extended by a year is because of what the people had said. Another area is the division of revenue amongst the 3 layers of government. If you look at what's happening at the budget now, the criticism was that more money goes to, biggest percentage goes to national government and so on. But now there is a movement, and we've been improving as far as local government is concerned, getting more and more of the total percentage of the nationally raised revenue. Which again, this is something which has come from the people, from the people. Again, so it does shape whether we can say that we were at the optimal level is something else. But I'm just mentioning those examples to show that we have been listening to people as far as the budget is concerned. But the problem, one of the problems which is there about this thing, which we have identified ourselves, is that sometimes for somebody who's somewhere in Mahellering, right, somebody who's somewhere in Ngwavuma, it's difficult for them to interact with this process. because it's too far, they don't have communication things. So one of the things that we have said to Parliament is that more resources should be given to Parliament so that the Parliament should have more time to access the people and listen to the people. It should not be an elitist project. Everybody should have an opportunity to have an impact as to how the budget is spent.
Yes, my very last question. There has been an establishment of the Parliamentary Budget Office for a few years.
Yes.
Do you think it is assisting or it is meeting its objectives as far as assisting Parliament, especially in ensuring that money is well spent on oversight and so on?
You see, one thing about the PBO is that it's independent. They say it as it is.
Yes.
Right? They say it as it is. Perhaps even unlike me, I represent the African National Congress where I am. Right? So one or the other, I'm constrained by the policies of the organization I belong to.
Yes.
And it goes for all other MPs.
Yes.
Right? It goes for all other MPs. But the PBO is independent. So they become scientific, they look at the thing and say, as far as we're concerned, this is the correct way, this is the wrong. So it does help us because all of us as members of Parliament do accept that what comes from PBO is an independent view. It's not a view which is jaundiced by which party I'm coming from.
Yes.
So they play a very critical role and they need to be beefed up and also empowered so that they can even play even a more bigger role in the whole process of budgeting and monitoring.
Okay. Dr. Buthelezi, thank you so much for coming and for sharing and giving us your insight. Yeah. We hope that every time when we knock at your door, you will also answer. And that was Chairperson of the Standing Committee on Appropriations, Dr. Buthelezi. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you.
Next, let's see this insert and we'll come back. Stay tuned.
Following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better. Parliament TV, channel 408 on DSTV.
In this budget, we're taking steps to support education, health, the fight against crime and corruption, and to improve capital investment, among others. Over the next 3 years, we allocate 3.3 trillion to the social wage to support vulnerable and low-income households. This is approximately 60% of the non-interest spending. We've prioritized spending on the following key areas. In 2017, government announced a policy for free higher education. We are announcing an additional allocation of 32 billion rand for financial support to current bursary holders and first-year students under the National Education Finance Aid Scheme. Any further shortfalls will be funded from within the baseline of the Department of Education. Madam Speaker, at the height of the COVID-19, our teachers had to make tremendous sacrifices to ensure that our children get educated. Equally, our healthcare workers were among those that were the last and only line of defense against the pandemic. In this budget, we're adding 24.6 billion for provincial education department to address the shortfalls in the compensation of teachers. An additional 15.6 billion is allocated to provincial health departments to support their continued response to COVID-19 and to bridge shortfalls in essential goods and services. 3.3 billion is allocated to absorb medical interns and community service doctors. 87.7 billion is added to the police budget. The department is allocated 1 billion to implement personnel reforms, and another 800 million may be available in the following year, subject to satisfactory progress. That's the Department of Defense. We are also strengthening the resources of the justice system and our courts. In this regard, the budget of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development is increased by 1.1 billion, while the Office of District Justice received an additional 39.9 million. The South African National Road Agency receives an additional 9.9 billion for maintaining the non-toll road network. Over and above this, the budget facility for infrastructure has approved funding for several water projects. 2.1 billion is allocated for raising the wall of the Klein Willem Dam. The Lipile water board is allocated 1.4 billion for the Olifantsfontein Ebenezer plants. The Umgeni Water Board is allocated 813 million for the Lower Umkomazi water supply chain scheme. I'm pleased to announce that the project to maintain 6 border posts, including Beit Bridge, is at an advanced stage of preparation. Feasibility studies have been completed and a request for proposal will be issued in March 2022. Madam Speaker, we watch in outrage and sadness as flames devour the buildings in which our Constitution was born. I'm gratified to learn of the enthusiasm of South Africans who want to be part of rebuilding Parliament. I'm looking forward to truly a national effort for this. The Department of Social Development will receive the largest allocation of 58.6 billion over the medium term for the following. First, to initiate a new extended child support grant for double orphans. This is to encourage the care of orphans within families rather than foster care. Second, to provide inflationary increases to permanent social grants. For 2022-23 fiscal year, the old age, war veterans, disability, and care dependence grants will increase by 90 rand in October. The foster care and child support grants will increase by a once-off 20 rand in April. Thirdly, 44 billion rand is allocated for a 12-month extension of the 350 social relief grant, total distress grant. Honourable members, the social relief distress grant was introduced in 2021 as a temporary relief measure in view of the plight of those who have lost economic opportunities and were adversely affected during the worst periods of the pandemic. These emergency grants added to the country's already extensive social safety net. South Africa now pays grants to more than 46% of the population. Finally, the 2022-23 contingency reserve is increased by a 5 billion rand. This provides for an amount already approved in the previous budget for the Land Bank to be paid in the new financial year. We remain committed, if I may come back to the Land Bank issue, precisely because of the difficulties in settling with the lenders on time. We couldn't make the transfer during this financial year. Progress is being made in settling with the lenders, and we think by the beginning of the financial year, we'll make progress, and we're making that 5 billion available for the next financial year. We remain committed to controlling those parts of the budget that are permanent in nature, including by arresting historical rapid increase in the public sector wage bill. Compensation spending will increase marginally from 665.1 billion in 2021-22 to 702 billion in 24-25, at an average annual rate of increase 1.8%. As indicated in 2021 medium-term budget policy statement, we have allocated additional funding of 20.5 billion rand in 2022-23 to meet the cost of implications of the 2021 Public Service Wage Agreement. A public sector labour summit is scheduled to take place as from the 28th to the 31st of March. This summit is an important opportunity for stakeholders to engage in building sustainable public services and remuneration guidelines.
Following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better. Parliament TV, channel 408 on DSTV.
In terms of the Constitution, government is accountable to Parliament. Parliament, as the representative of the people, monitors and seeks to influence government policy and action through the budget. The budget is the instrument for translating policies and plans into public goods and services. Any policy or plan without a budget attached to it is unlikely to be successfully implemented. Economic success depends on the ability of government to employ limited resources with maximum effect. The role of Parliament in this regard cannot be overstated. Parliament's duty is to detect and prevent abuse, prevent illegal and unconstitutional budgetary conduct on the part of the government, make government budgetary operations more transparent, and hold the government answerable on how taxpayers' money is spent. Parliament exercises its oversight through various portfolio committees that assess the budget and other plans, as well as the performance of each department, including their financial performance, and hold them accountable. The budget process is crucial to good governance because it ensures that government expenditure remains aligned to South Africa's policy goals and objectives. What is also of great importance is that ongoing monitoring and tracking of the executive by Parliament allows for intervention in the event of wrongful expenditure and failures in service delivery. The process holds government departments accountable for their expenditure and gives Parliament and the citizens it represents an opportunity to make their own demands and interventions. Parliament, following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better.
Following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better. Parliament TV, channel 408 on DSTV. Building our great South African nation together.
The mace is a symbol of the authority of the National Assembly. It is carried into the chamber by the Sergeant-at-Arms and announces the arrival of the Speaker of the National Assembly. It signifies that the House is formally in session and that its proceedings are official. Standing at 1.196 meters and weighing 9.86 kilograms, the current mace is a representation of South Africa's democracy. The new mace was designed to reflect the history, tradition, diversity, culture, and languages of South Africa. The mace also celebrates the country's natural beauty, its plant and animal life, and its rich mineral resources. Each element was carefully chosen with this in mind. Though it appears to be a single unit, the mace was made and fitted in sections on an aluminium core. At the head of the mace is an 18-karat gold drum covered in springbok skin, which in turn is attached to the drum by 18 buttons made from South African minerals and gemstones. On top of the drum rests a book made from gold on which, in raised text, is an extract from the preamble to the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. The Constitution is the supreme law of the country and plays a central role in the development of the new South Africa. This is echoed in its position at the top of the mace. The drum features images of South Africans going about their daily business. Some of the depictions that can be seen on the drum is a miner, saxophonist, machinist, architect, builder, soccer player, forklift driver, scientist, teacher, doctor, domestic worker, a woman with a baby on her back and a hoe in her hand, a woman driving a tractor, and children reading and working. The images are designed to look like African woodcuts and were chiseled by hand to create a three-dimensional look. The drum is fitted on a gold neck illustrated with dancing sand figures. 3 platinum discs in decreasing size connect the head of the mace to the shaft. The shaft is made of aluminium and inlaid with cherry and box wood. The top of the shaft is encircled by an 18-karat gold band with 6 black and 6 white half-carat diamonds set into it. Beneath this is a South African coat of arms in full-color enamel. 2/3 from the top of the mace is a beaded South African flag. The white on the flag is represented by 800 platinum or white gold beads, the yellow by 70 yellow gold beads, and the red, green, blue and black by colored glass beads. Before the mace tapers to the end is another gold band of 6 black and 6 white diamonds, and then another band of platinum. The shape of the mace recalls the Nobkiri, an African symbol of defense, authority, and leadership. The drum, which forms the head of the mace, is an expression of the African tradition of using drums to call people together for a meeting. It's also a reminder that South Africa's transition to democracy was achieved through dialogue, with Parliament serving as a place where many different voices are heard. Gold is one of the core ingredients in the mace. Archaeological finds show that gold has been mined and used in African culture for centuries. Its use in the mace symbolizes the country's natural wealth and also the ancient indigenous gold mining traditions. The open book on top of the drum symbolizes the Constitution of South Africa and the principles around which Parliament functions. The platinum rings found at intervals along the shaft of the mace recall the rings worn by Ndebele women. Under the first set of platinum rings, at the base of the drum, is an image of 2 Khoisan taken from the Linton Stone, a world-famous example of South African rock art dating back at least 20,000 years. The image is a symbol of social interaction, coherence, and interdependence, all elements needed for a country such as South Africa to grow and prosper. The result of all this is a mace that recalls the past, mirrors the present, and looks forward to the future.
Following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better. Parliament TV, channel 408 on DSTV.
And welcome back to Parliament Television. As we said, the MTBPS provides an update on the current budget and sets out government's priorities and budget allocations over the medium-term expenditure framework. Parliament has several committees tasked with the direct oversight of the country's budget. And today, I am now, at this very moment, joined by the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Finance, Ntade Joseph Maswangai. Welcome, sir.
Thanks.
Has the day been so busy for you today?
Yeah, obviously it's a very busy day for Parliament and the country at large, because this is a budget for the whole country.
Yes, and we are now halfway in the 6th dispensation. There has been priorities set. What is it that you think amongst whatever that has happened will shape the adjustment budget of today that will be presented by the minister?
As we have raised issues with the minister in February on the main budget, we would like the budget to deal with key and critical issues of priority. Key amongst those should be education. The success of every nation that takes itself serious is investing on the youth, on the skills. So that's a priority number 1 for the whole country, which is stipulated in the NDP, National Development Plan. Out there, young people from a poor background need more assistance in terms of NSFAS and other requisite resources. The issue of health is quite very critical, but the budget must talk to the youth and women. They are the most affected
Yes.
when it comes to unemployment, hunger, lack of skills, and a whole range of other problems like poverty. So this budget must speak to that constituency. It's very, very critical.
Yes, but as well, how have you, as a committee, made sure that oversight take effect, especially regarding structural reforms to support economic activity?
We constantly raise issues with the minister that one amongst other issues which is going to be a problem is the amount of money that the country is spending on servicing the debt. That servicing cost is making somebody richer somewhere in the world. And it's the money that was supposed to be used for development. I think for now, South Africa owes almost 4 trillion to lenders. And servicing that debt costs more than 300 billion. That's a lot of money.
Yes.
The minister should tell the public how is government going to make sure that it reduces the debt service cost, because that's the money that was supposed to be going to projects, infrastructure. We'll expect that the minister should talk to issues of infrastructure rollout to create jobs and also to intervene in the economy. You can't leave the economy to the market forces and you think they are going to invest their money all over. They won't do that. They are on the boycott. So it is for the state with its resources to decisively intervene in the economy of South Africa. Then private sector will follow.
Yes.
That's very critical. But there are very serious issues. Those who want to invest raise issues of load shedding.
Yes.
Investors say, but how do I get involved in production for 4 hours the whole day? Because it's load shedding throughout. We are quite very worried as parliamentarians that this issue of load shedding should be addressed. Young people now are writing exams. In the middle of him or her studying, boom, the electricity is gone. And the following day at 9 o'clock, the student is supposed to sit for exam. This load shedding has got detrimental impact economically, socially, and on other aspects. And it must be resolved. When we come out of this gathering this afternoon, tabling of the budget, there should be clarity on how we are going to deal with the issue of energy security. Water now is also a problem. In areas like Johannesburg or Gauteng, where you have never thought that there will be a problem of water, there's now water rationing or water shedding.
Yes.
And that is the industrial and commercial hubs of South Africa. If you don't have water, you don't have electricity, what kind of economy are you going to run? Yes. So this budget should be able to address those key critical issues.
Yes, but I also would love to ask, just as to rehash on what you were saying, to say that, do you think then Parliament shouldn't just play oversight? Do you also advise the executive, like the minister and whoever that is responsible, if ever probably this is an issue of capacity, is it an issue of the budget, and so on and so forth? What is then the committee especially advising on?
Parliament has got 2 critical roles. Its key role is to make laws. The other role is to play oversight on the executive and the state organs. And from time to time, we meet Treasury and raise issues, like the issue I've raised about the debt service cost.
Yes.
We raise it when we do oversight on Treasury. Make sure that the departments are able to spend. I will not be surprised if the minister is going to say that there are lots of billions that department and state entities are not spending. We have got problem of under spending. When they come to Parliament in February and October now, they will say allocate more money to SOEs, but you find that very same SOE is not spending money. And the same with other departments. We are assisted in playing oversight role by institutions like the Auditor General Like this week, we should have met the Auditor General with the Department of Finance to process their annual performance plan. We're going to get the assistance from Auditor General and check how Treasury will have performed, because those are institutions that are supporting democracy.
Yes.
And we have said that the sooner they finalize the audit outcome, the better, so that you have got a scientific tool to measure the level of success or evaluate whether what they have presented in Parliament at the beginning of last year, that this is what we are going to achieve, have they achieved that?
Yes.
So those institutions supporting democracy work with Parliament to make sure that we monitor and evaluate the performance of the executive and the state organs.
Yes, and in fact, talking about the institutions supporting democracy, the FCC has indicated just recently that the budget does not seem to be allocated in a manner that gives priority focus to development and catalyzing priorities. And then how has the committee then, made sure that there is a balance in the budget prioritization process that focuses on customizing or cushioning the poor and the vulnerable, as well as the economic recovery, because COVID-19 hit on us? What is it that the committee can also suggest?
Remember, Treasury is a department that finds expression from the Constitution. It is responsible for the fiscus of this country. It allocates money through DORA, Division of Revenue Act, to all spheres of government and to entities. But the problem is when those entities don't spend money, which is intended for service delivery. And Treasury doesn't have much power except to come back to Parliament and say, look, this department or that entity is not spending money. Can we take this money somewhere else? It's a matter that we are going to emphasize this time, that if Treasury identifies in time that this entity is not going to spend, that money should be taken to where it matters most. Because as I've said, out here in the streets of Cape Town, you meet so many young people carrying envelopes. In those envelopes are their CVs. You go to the Department of Labor, there are long queues, and young people have even lost hope. So we believe that what the minister is going to table this afternoon will bring back hope, more especially to young people who are the future of this country. So we are trying our level best to make sure that in playing oversight, money is spent appropriately for the benefit of the taxpayers, the South African population. And Treasury, it can do whatever it does. But if it is failed by other ministries, that's where the problem comes. Because remember, he's the Minister of Finance. He's not the President who can whip another minister. He doesn't have those powers. He can raise those issues with the colleague in the cabinet platform and committees. But at the end, it's the President who has got those powers. The issue of the economic recovery and construction, it has been tabled by the President in Parliament to say after COVID, even before COVID, remember we had issues of rating agencies raising issues with the country. And now, for instance, we are facing the issue of FATF, Financial Action Task Force. Is South Africa going to be grey listed? I don't think so. We as Parliament, we are now processing a bill called General Law Amendment Bill that will make sure that South Africa addresses issues of anti-money laundering and fighting against terrorism, so that come February next year, South Africa should not be grey listed by FATF. So if we can make sure that all those measures tabled by the President on economic reconstruction, following prudently our economic policy, and make sure that we always have our eyes on the ball and not do other things which detract government. I believe that we have got that capacity. And we wish the minister well. We'll continue to work with him, support Treasury and government as a whole, but make sure that we hold them accountable as it is our responsibility as Parliament.
Yes. My last question, because we are pressed with time, I had a lot to to ask you about is this issue of the country, budget oversight, especially in the era where corruption and underspending is a challenge. So has the committee initiated any additional budget oversight, like measures which will ensure that not only the appropriate budget allocations for whoever that is supposed to be receiving, that they are done appropriately, decisively, so that money can go where it is supposed to go and spend, and as far as implementing whichever projects have been budgeted for.
Tomorrow, I think after 12, we'll be meeting the minister as the finance committees of Parliament, standing committee, finance, appropriations, and the select committees from the NCOP to analyze this budget that will be tabled. In making that analysis, we are assisted by the FFC, Financial and Fiscal Commission, and the Parliamentary Budget Office, the PBO, who have got scientific tools on analyzing the budget. They have been helping us a lot, as you have raised the issue raised by FFC, which is an organ of state that works, that account to Parliament. So we will be with them tomorrow, going through all the items to make sure that they speak to the issues that were raised by the President in SONA, to the 5 priorities that are there in terms of the MTSF and the NDP. We are in 2022, we are left with 8 years to 2030.
Yes.
Are we going to make the targets set out in the NDP? I'm not sure. It's for government to take responsibility. It's not for me to say they will or not.
Yes.
Otherwise, we'll be interfering with the executive competence. But we'll make sure in our engagement with the Minister, Treasury, and all other entities that report to us to make sure that, look, this is the money that the South Africans have raised. Because this money comes from revenue. Let's make sure that it is spent appropriately. Where there is corruption, there must be action. We should not always be, when we take public platform, we say there's corruption. You demoralize people. Why don't you take action with those who are corrupt? Those who are conducting money laundering. Money is coming from all over and cannot be accounted for. Such people must be dealt with. The crime which is in the country is terrible. The killing of children is unacceptable. If you are a parent, you know how painful it is for a child, innocent child, to be killed. 4-year-olds are raped. So lots of resources should also go to the law enforcement. You can't have a country where women and children feel unsafe in the presence of men. What kind of a country is that? Because men should provide security to children and women. So there must also be a lot of work, because this in itself, outside world look at us and say, hey, they are ever killing each other there. Look at the abduction or the kidnapping of a municipal manager in Mpumalanga, Kangala district. Right in the offices. People are not somewhere on the street. They pick her up with the driver right in the precinct of the district.
Place of work.
Yes, place of work. So there should also be more concentration on making sure that the law enforcement agencies have got teeth, and also the judiciary should deal with such people ruthlessly. Apply, make sure that, I'm not saying they can't get bail or this and that, but surely they must be sent to prison for many years to deter this kind of heinous crimes that we are witnessing in the country. And I hope the minister will be able to address that this afternoon.
Okay, thank you so much. I would also maybe just lastly say to you that thank you so much, sir. And then we need to also love our country insofar as we spend the budget and we use our resources adequately so that each and everyone can be proud to be South African. Thank you so much, and Dr. Masongeng, for coming to us. Just wait a second with us. And then that was Chairperson of the Standing Committee on Finance for Parliament, and he has given us so much insights over the budget and what his committee is doing. Then Parliament Parliament in adopting, Parliament in adopting this revised fiscal framework should ensure that an appropriate balance between revenue, expenditure, and borrowing, that the debt levels and debt interest costs are reasonable. The cost of recurrent spending is not deferred to the future, so that the generations must not carry that bill. And then as well, adequate provision for spending on infrastructure development, overall capital spending and maintenance. Consideration of the short, medium, and long-term implications of the fiscal framework, division of revenue and national budget on the long-term growth potential of the economy, and the development of the country. Also to take into account all public revenue and expenditure, including extra budgetary funds and contingent liabilities. On that note, let's go this side and then we'll come back.
Following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better. Parliament TV, channel 408 on DSTV.
In terms of the Constitution, government is accountable to Parliament. Parliament, as the representative of the people, monitors and seeks to influence government policy and action through the budget. The budget is the instrument for translating policies and plans into public goods and services. Any policy or plan without a budget attached to it is unlikely to be successfully implemented. Economic success depends on the ability of government to employ limited resources with maximum effect. The role of Parliament in this regard cannot be overstated. Parliament's duty is to detect and prevent abuse, prevent illegal and unconstitutional budgetary conduct on the part of the government, make government budgetary operations more transparent, and hold the government answerable on how taxpayers' money is spent. Parliament exercises its oversight through various portfolio committees that assess the budget and other plans, as well as the performance of each department, including their financial performance, and hold them accountable. The budget process is crucial to good governance because it ensures that government expenditure remains aligned to South Africa's policy goals and objectives. What is also of great importance is that ongoing monitoring and tracking of the executive by Parliament allows for intervention in the event of wrongful expenditure and failures in service delivery. The process holds government departments accountable for their expenditure and gives Parliament and the citizens it represents an opportunity to make their own demands and interventions. Parliament, following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better.
Following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better. Parliament TV, channel 408 on DSTV.
And welcome back to Parliament Television again. During the State of the Nation address, the President outlined government's priorities and objectives, and the Minister of Finance allocates funding for these programs, whilst the Auditor General comes in not only to monitor government spending, but to examine financial statements and transactions to ensure that taxpayers' money is spent without irregularities, and then report these findings to oversight bodies, while Standing Committee on Auditor General play an oversight role. Parliament's oversight role in the budget process cannot be understated. Members of Parliament are elected by the people to represent them. Therefore, Parliament authorizes the executive to spend, tax, and oversee executive action on behalf of the people of South Africa. Joining me now is the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Auditor General, none other than Ntate Sakumzi Somyo. Sir, good afternoon and welcome to Parliament TV.
Good afternoon, and
Yes.
afternoon to your listeners.
Yes. Just as an icebreaker, what is the role of your committee?
As you have alluded to quite well, our committee plays oversight on the work of the Auditor General, and such reports tabled on time, and as well looking into its own strategy, whether it meets its own objectives in terms of the auditing function, as well to look into how the independent criterion is met by the AG in auditing the financials of various entities which receive financial support from the National Fiscus.
Yes, and this week the Auditor General has been briefing several committees on their work to Parliament. So these reports, because the Auditor General has been giving reports, what do we do? What does Parliament do with these reports?
The role of Parliament, as it categorized through a number of portfolio committees and standing committees, is to oversee such expenditure in line with a category of key performance areas which have come through the will of Parliament and tabled into the National Assembly on various stages. That is very critical because value for money is determined on the basis of how various departments and entities would account for each and every area that has been identified in their annual performance plan.
And then the Auditor General also highlighted that there is poor financial health in the SOEs, as well as the poor state of corporate governance, coupled with weak internal controls. So what is the committee then now doing with this kind of instability and non-compliance with legislation and the lack of consequence management?
It pains us. It pains us to receive reports from time to time in consecutive years of non-functionality of some public entities, because that signals a way to death of such entities, as we have experienced. The failure to table financials, the failure to be audited, the failure to spend appropriately is a clear route of collapse of functionality of such entities. So the duty of various executives in charge of such functionality of such entities can be emphasized more.
Yes.
It indeed points to them as to whether they are honestly having their eye on the ball, on the functionality of such. Because even if you look into the governance instances, you'd find out that such entities fall foul of laxity, and therefore it will lead to unfortunate instance of their non-accountability for receipts that they are supposed to account for.
Yes, and also this includes local government sphere, where there is no accountability, there is failures in terms of service delivery. So in order for, or I should put it this way, that what is the committee doing in terms of working with the provincial and local spheres, and taking this one also, say, from the recent local government week, which was held by the NCOP, to assist municipalities to be able to account, to do everything according to the book?
Look into the the reviewed Public Audit Act, where it has identified the fact that the Auditor General of South Africa should have a firm arm on to insisting on the accountability of such entities, inclusive overall of the spheres of government as they exist in South Africa, which would entail even local government. Through that process, there's identification of material irregularity, which ought to be accounted for by the accounting officers and executive authorities. And that leads to the issuance of certificates for such adherence to the key areas of accountability. So far, you would find out that the country over is accountable for nothing less than 14 billion rand, which sits in the envelope of material irregularity, which is defined by fruitless expenditure, irregular expenditure, and that itself weighs heavily onto what is supposed to go into the development of our own communities out there.
Yes.
Once the budget is tabled, the Minister of Finance ought to follow those trends for our expectation to be indicative of how government would look into pointing the finger on those who fall foul in terms of such areas of non-accountability. The second instance, which I think the portfolio chair of finance has put some finger on, is the question of under-expenditure, which equally matches that amount.
Yes.
And if you look into totality, we go closer to 30 billion rand, which needs the eye and scrutiny of the Auditor General and accounting officers in various instances.
Yes.
We can't be happy when such support from fiscus lies there in the foul performance and as well in less performance by various entities.
Yes.
That is robbing the country, the populace, what is supposed to be going to them. We experience potholes, we experience less quality on water services, and those problems ought to be attended by such support, which is not doing what it is supposed to do. The third instance is that the country will be troubled to go and borrow while there is money which is not spent. That is not a play good for the country to service its own population.
Yes, sir. And then during the past 24 months, the AGSA has been, faced with an increase in the number of and complexity of legal challenges or threats of legal challenges over the audit and audit-related services. While resolving disputes in a court of law, and it's a democratic process, but this disturbs, and then it also creates pressure and a difficult, psychological environment for the audit teams to perform their duties. So what kind of support does the committee give to the Office of the AG to ensure that they are able to do their job without any fear or favor?
You see, in the first instance, what we're happy about such challenges, the courts have come heavily on those who thought that they're going to receive a fair ear on their part by insisting that the Auditor General's findings can be reviewable. And secondary to that, we have recently adopted a framework which is going to assist the Office of the Auditor General in engaging auditees on matters that they don't have eye to eye on. And that is a very critical mechanism to insist that those matters which fall within a fair understanding of those who are audited from time to time are matters that are resolved at the point of the audit, not anywhere else within the frame of the accounting standards, which are a part of informing how the Auditor General should perform its own audit.
Yes, and Tate Somyo, thank you so much. We are now 20-odd minutes to the minister's presentation of the budget downstairs in the City Hall. Thank you so much for speaking to us. We hope that next time when we call, as usual, you will answer our call. That was...
We hope that the minister would do well in tabling such a policy statement.
Yes.
Thank you.
So that was Ntate Sakumzi Somyo, the chairperson of the Standing Committee on the Auditor General. Still a lot coming. We've got 2 doctors that will be following now. They are experts, and then we will talk about the issues related to medium-term policy budget statement, and then the next one that is coming to us now, we will just keep you waiting. We will reveal them when we come back. Let's go into this insert.
Following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better. Parliament TV, channel 408 on DSTV.
Retirement member. Somebody will say, oh, you said you've got 182 billion rand last year. You were transparent, you ain't saying, Nikumba intending and it takes to 7 sayona lama. That's why we're not increasing taxes. We can't say when you get such big amounts of money and so on, and we're transferring that and putting money into your pockets. That's what we have done. Transparent. Then also Fundani budget review helps you on Tax 1, Chapter 4, on debt, Chapter 7. So let me go. Retirement funds play a critical role in channeling savings into productive investment. There's been this outcry about Regulation 28 of the Pension Funds Act, which sets out criteria through which these funds may make investment. After consultation, changes have been proposed to these regulations to enable greater investment in infrastructure by the funds. After consultation again of these changes, the amendments will be gazetted next month. Regulation 28. Next month in the Gazette, March. Government has also proposed a fundamental restructuring of retirement system for individuals to allow for greater preservation and partial access to funds through what they call a two-pot system. Part of this proposal includes the possibility of short-term access, which would be depend on the approval by trustees of each fund. Let me just explain this thing. There's a Utito promised us are you going to give us? No, I can't give you money from your own pension fund. Your own pension fund has got its own trustees. The decision to take money out of the fund must be a decision of a trustee. The only thing I'm going to do as the Minister of Finance is to create a conducive environment for trustees to make that decision if they think the fund is capable of doing so. But the Minister of Finance, what must copy man and no. Tingapandling a bail. No. Your trustees must make the decision. I will make the law which make it possible for the trustees to make the decision, not me. Consultations are proceeding following the release of the discussion paper last year, and the draft legislation on these amendments will be published for comment in the middle of the year. In conclusion,
Following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better. Parliament TV, Channel 408 on DSTV.
The budget reflects the choices that government has to make, and it is the tool it uses to achieve its economic and development goals. In the budget, government sets out what it's going to spend and the income it collects, which it needs to finance its expenditure. The government has to balance a wide range of legitimate demands with limited resources at its disposal. Budget oversight is intended to help government move forward to realize its goals by increasing government's accountability to its citizens. The budget process occurs over a period of about 18 months. The budget of any financial year undergoes a 4-stage process. The stages are drafting, planning and formulation, the legislative process, implementation, as well as auditing and assessment. Parliament and government departments plan the budget for months in advance for the following year, implementing the current budget while continuously monitoring it for delivery and compliance with policy and evaluating and auditing the previous year's budget. During the legislative phase of the budget, the National Assembly, the National Council of Provinces, and the provincial legislatures debate budget votes with the involvement of interest groups and civil society, the media, and the general public. This is to ensure that they reflect national priorities and accommodate outcomes and actions required by the mid-term strategic framework. It is important to measure the effectiveness of public spending and the manner in which public resources are spent. The more immediate goals are to ensure that government budget priorities are consistent with the declared policy objectives and that the financial resources allocated to priority areas are spent fully and properly. However, a larger purpose of the budget process is to contribute to democracy through ensuring openness, transparency, and accountability for public resources. Parliament, following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better.
Following up on our commitments to the people, making your future work better. Parliament TV, Channel 408 on DSTV.
You are still watching Parliament TV on DSTV, Channel 408. The Minister of Finance is minutes away to deliver his MTBBS at 2 o'clock, now at the City Hall in Cape Town. And then we are now, as Parliament, not forgetting that all that has to happen in Parliament here will be legislated, and then whoever that has been allocated the budget must take accountability. I am not alone. I have been with one person. Now I am graced by 2 doctors. One is Dr. Jankis, who is the Director of Parliamentary Budget Office, and the other one is Dr. Mbava, who is the Chairperson of the Financial Fiscal Commission of South Africa. We call them institutions supporting democracy. So, dear doctors, welcome.
Thank you so much, Shelley. It's good to be here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, and I must say I am definitely really blessed to have the 2 of you here. And I think we are relaxed. Yeah. We will talk. We will be educated. We will learn a lot from you. Let me start with you, Dr. Mbava. What is the mandate of the FFC?
Thank you so much for that question, Shelley. The Financial and Fiscal Commission is a constitutional body mandated to advise government on financial and fiscal matters. As the minister now is going to table the medium-term budget policy statement, in terms of the Act, the FFC Act, we as the FFC must respond to the minister's budget tomorrow. So after he has spoken, we analyze it, then we make our recommendations.
Okay. Yeah. And the same goes for one big office that Dr. Jankis is leading, the PBO. And earlier on, I was talking to Honorable Buthelezi. He says, you don't look at the party, you don't look at anybody, you are very scientific. That is how far I know, as far as he told me. What is the responsibility?
Good afternoon, ma'am, and thank you so much for inviting us, and thanks for Dr. Mbaba as well for being here. Look, certainly, Parliamentary Budget Office is the entity of Parliament, established by Parliament, by law of Parliament, to really advise Parliament on macroeconomic fiscal policy proposed by government, but any other related money bills. So we really work closely with committees, as Dr. Mbaba was saying, when the minister or executive present a budget and related documents, we provide advice of some of the important considerations before Parliament adopt those matters. Very daunting task indeed. The chairperson was correct.
I don't think, and you speak very big terms, financial terms and all that. I normally listen to you. Let's come back to you, Doctor. Just give us your projection as to what and the expectations of the MTBPS coming.
Thank you so much. So I think if we remember in budget 2022 in February, the minister committed to achieving a fiscal surplus, a primary budget surplus in the next financial year, which is next year. So when we project now, we see that government has made a lot of income or revenue that has come in, and the expenditure have been less. So there is a primary budget surplus that we're going to see. It means that we are going to have more money in the kitty. And in the next 2 years as well, we also expect that this primary budget will be sustained. So we now have ended the era of having a shortage, a shortfall in our budget, which is good news. But that's not the end of the story. This is only possible in the next few years if all the other competing demands on the fiscus are actually realistic. There is a demand for the extension of the SRD grant, which can actually cost more money and actually get us back into a deficit position. There is also a ballooning public sector wage that is uncontrollable. Public sector wage, on average, it costs about 30 billion rand every year. And then also, Shelley, we have failing state-owned entities, which needs bailouts and guarantees from government and financial injections from government. So that money has to come from somewhere. So if we do not contain the expenditure...
Okay, just to stop you, the minister is already arriving now. He is outside the city hall, just to update our viewers that the minister is here. The budget is happening, the MTBPS is happening, the doctors, we can see it's all systems go. We are ready as Parliament, as Parliament TV.
Yes.
We will be feeding the mainstream media. We will be working with everyone that is interested in this budget, because the main thing here is about working for our people and making sure that we are going to be, I am told that this is our #1 citizen, as we see. It is the president. And then we welcome the president to Parliament for the budget statement today. Just let's pause on that one and come back to you, Dr. Mbaba, for us to continue. You can continue.
So in a nutshell, we're saying that now we have a primary budget surplus, but it is a very, very thin line to walk in. For us to sustain that, we need to make sure that we contain our expenditure. That is the problem. That is the issue.
Okay. And you know, because the FFC, this is something that, you know, some of us and most of us wouldn't understand. The FFC monitors and advises the state, not the state, the executive, whilst the PBO is doing that to Parliament as another arm of the state. I think I'm getting it correctly.
Yep.
So your expectations, Dr. Jantjies, and your brief to the members, because at the end of the day, both of you are going to analyze the speech of the minister today and make sure that parliamentarians basically do oversight on the executive as per the law prescribes.
Yep. Thank you so much. I think what we do normally around this time, we prepare what we call pre-statement briefs to the committees. And I think what we have said in the pre-briefing statement, we did outline to say what are some of the outcomes that government has achieved over the macroeconomic policy objectives that are set out over the years. And what we realized that we said to the members, to the committees, look, much has been realized over time, particularly we look at the past 10 years in a way of looking forward for the next 10 years in particular. But I think what we're concerned about, we said to the members, is that we've seen a lot of decline in many socioeconomic challenges in the country over time. In part, a lot to do with the fiscal policy stances was taken over time, seeing higher employment, lack of investment in economy, but also inequality expanding over time, and largely due to the macroeconomic policy that was taken over the past 10 years. And I suppose what we're saying in our analysis, look, going forward, they probably have to be rethinking around that to say, what are some of the macroeconomic policy positions that would get us in a state where we see lesser unemployment, lesser poverty, and more investment in the economy, but particularly dealing with some of the structural issues within the economy. And that analysis really picks up on particularly look at the fiscal policy stance, which informs the statement, which informs the government's spending priorities and so many other things. And really, which again, linking it back to the medium-term national development plan objectives, how we are going to realize those, because so far we have not been able to realize those targets set out in the midterm budget, in the NDP, because of the macroeconomic policy stance we've taken over the years. And our view is that there has to be a reform, in terms of how we go forward. The current trajectory we've seen, even announced in the budget, would not necessarily take us in a space where we realize most of these objectives that are in the NDP. I think that's really broadly where we want to start. Issues around investments, issues around supporting sectors, particularly around extension of credit provision to the sectors. It's very important to ensure that monetary policy and both fiscal policy are supportive to transforming the economy, but also are supportive to ensure that there's employment created by investing more in our economy. Dr. Mbava mentioned the state-owned entities.
Yes.
They have a very important role to play in our economy, particularly investing in infrastructure. And if you're not going to provide support to them, they're not able to invest. And those are the issues that really would provide much support, but also the support household. The bigger issue which we've seen over the past year or two, Dr. Mbava, around the household support, the SRD has been one of the very important government interventions in really supporting low-income households.
Yeah.
And there certainly has to be some form of a permanent policy that really continue to provide support for households, in particular as part of economic policy going forward. And that's been seen really a lot as contributing to economic development and economic growth and dealing with inequality and unemployment. And just the last point, already we've seen signs, as Dr. Mbava was saying, signs that the SRD has been able to reduce poverty. Signs are there that it also has been able to reduce inequality already.
Yes,
so there's quite good. So we're hoping that there will be reform, rethinking in terms of how we go forward and realize some of these objectives.
Yes. Dr. Mbava, all the time the Parliament has got the Women's Charter report back sessions. And then, there are some challenges, especially regarding funding. So what is your advice as FCC as to how best can the funding, especially from the executive, to be allocated to those who need them more for the betterment of their lives as well as sustained, achievements and development within the country?
So because now we know that we're going to have additional revenue because of the commodity boom that has benefited us as a country, we should use some of that money in terms of funding social welfare, making sure that our people, the most vulnerable, are protected. So we need to also capacitate allocations such as education, because in the past, Dr. Jantjies, as you know, we have seen declining allocations to education.
Yes.
And also to health.
To health.
Our
also,
people
yes.
actually, you know, they go to public health care, you
There's
know,
no
hospitals.
medication
There's no
sometimes.
medication. There are fewer nurses. So we need more allocations into those functions. And also we need to, you know, to think about how does a basic income grant look like going forward? Because right now we expect the minister, obviously, to extend it maybe for a year.
Yes.
But then what happens after that? Those people who are benefiting from it, what do we think they should be on? Can fund it. There is no doubt about it. We do need to protect the vulnerable. And the SRD, as little as it is, it does have some sort of benefit, you know. So we can look at the amount, maybe review the amount, and then the criteria as well, and also the amount that we need to budget for it.
Yes, but to you both, has there been any monitoring and evaluation of the impact of this grant?
Well, thank you. I think now in our brief as well, we do talk about that to say, particularly when you look at this year in particular, there was a particular amount allocated, and that amount was not enough. And as a result, there's been a bit of challenges around implementing the grant itself. And I think what we're saying, one of the bigger issues facing Parliament as well, is around having clear monitoring mechanisms that also allow us to follow through on some of the issues, because our analysis on midterm strategic framework shows that actually some of these things are not reported. And certainly Parliament has to develop mechanisms that is able to pick up those things within Parliament itself and follow through on those measures. So I think it's a big question of having information that is very useful for Parliament to monitor. It's a big issue, because even if we look at our brief, we do show that we tried to do some monitoring, but because of this there's lack of comprehensive information, it's very difficult for members to actually deal with. It's a big question that has to be addressed.
So as the FFC, we've done extensive work on the child support grant.
Yes.
And we've made strong recommendations to say to the minister, they must review the amount to at least 625 rand.
Yes.
You know, and we think the minister has listened, so we see their policy moves towards that. But now going forward, we're going to look at the SRD grant and look at it in terms of affordability and how it can look like. So we do think that we do need to have a social safety net for our people.
Okay.
And we recommend that.
And then, you know, Dr. Jantjies, what are also policy priorities that have informed the guidance and advice given by the PBO to, and as well in preparation to the members and to the department in terms of this adjustment budget?
Well, I think our main analysis really it's the issue of saying there has to be some, reform on the way around the macroeconomic policy reform itself, which informs how much of priorities how much expenditure we prioritize. But also there's the issue around revenue. Where will the additional money come from? There are some analyses showing that there are potential areas where revenue could be raised. But I think the big advice we put out in our brief is that government expenditure on basic services, education, healthcare, police and safety, social development has to increase to a certain level, which will provide much needed support or deal with some of the social economic in society, but largely also to create, to support the industrial policy changes that are required to ensure that economy is able to be transformed by firstly ensuring much support for manufacturing sectors is very clearly pronounced, and also support for local content or local procurements, but also ensuring that there's a proper support for exporting sectors. When you look at some of the sectors, particularly coming from the COVID-19, that requires much support from government, which will lead to more employment and creativity in our economy. So there's so much provisions we put out, but I know that you have limited time. I'll just stop
Yes,
there.
Definitely.
Yes.
Time is always
Yes.
the enemy here. Because I wanted to talk to you regarding the intergovernmental fiscal relations that are seem to be shaky, in terms of the FFC. And then going forward also, I wanted to ask you, Dr. Jantjies, regarding educating our public about the work of these two very important institutions that are, basically working for their own benefit.
Yes.
But,
Yes.
doctors, it is exactly 2 minutes before we go there. So I will be told what to do now, but let us just go on. Let me ask you to respond on the IGR one, and then Dr. Jantjies as well, just to wrap up and tell me what he also would be in position of as far as educating PBO. Most of us, I only got to learn about PBO when I got to Parliament. So we have a lot to do, myself and him.
Yes.
Yes, Doc.
So when we talk about the intergovernmental fiscal relations framework, we talk about the 3 spheres: local government, provincial government, national government. So national government gets most of the money, but service delivery happens at local government. What we have been saying is that we need to review how much money local government gets, because at local government, that is where all the basic services are being done. So we are hoping as well in this budget that there will be a larger allocation to the local government sphere in terms of enabling them to provide more basic services. So our intergovernmental fiscal relations system needs to be reviewed because it's unequal regarding who does the most. Even though local government does not actually get all the revenue, they do all the work.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And yourself also, Doctor, there are committees that are there and then they do their work. What is it there that you think can be done to strengthen the fiscal, the finance committees in terms of carrying out their oversight and doing their job effectively so that we can say bye-bye to non-spending, we can say bye-bye to corruption if ever there is some, and so that we can, say bye-bye to all the ills that the fiscus of government is being spent or not spent.
Well, I don't know if I can answer the question on what should Parliament do, but I think what we have said over the years is that the issue around follow through on recommendations, it's very important because when you look at the open budget studies internationally, shows that actually South Africa is one of the best country in terms of transparency of the budget in particular. But I think the one area where we shortfall on is our public participation.
Yes.
It's a big issue, and I think it also links quite well with the issue of follow through, because public will come and submit the inputs and how such inputs see their way through into the actual policy itself, but also how inclusive is the public participation, to go to all the rural areas and make sure that those inputs are taken into account. I think that's a bigger point you've raised, the importance of follow through, because the Minister of Finance does respond to the recommendations by the finance and appropriation committees, and the Parliament's opportunity to follow through on those responses, whether is it in line with the budget review recommendation report that you've sent out, and what are still things that need to follow through. I think that's the point that I would say is very important. Follow through and link it quite well to public participation in this regard. Thank you so much.
But do you also, Dr. Jantjies, just to follow on that, what you said, do you, when the committees, finance committees go on oversight, do you follow them so that they can be advised? Do you follow them so that they may, also the public, because I think that could be also the better platform where the PBO can be seen to be doing something, or is it just an issue of that PBO must remain apolitical or whatever, but you will be supporting a committee and advising a committee as well to present to the public to say what is their role in the PBO?
Well, I hope the powers that be are listening. because I think what we do, we're a very small outfit, as we all know. But our reports, our briefs, we do send it out to all the committees, which are very useful as we get feedback from them. But in many instances, we do participate in this process. But I think also the Act does give a specific role to do within the resources that we have. But I think the main thing is that our work, we put it out there to all the committees, that they use them during these processes. But we also do a lot of stakeholder engagements as an office. We have a planned meeting together with Dr. Mbava for our offices to really reflect in terms of how we can work together to strengthen the oversight. And it's something that's within our minds as offices, how we strengthen this role. So we do a lot of stakeholder engagements. I thought I was doing a lot of them, but clearly there's a lot that needs to be done.
Yeah. Yes.
So we'll do that, definitely. Yeah.
Yes. And in fact, okay, the parliament is starting now, so thank you so much for coming. I would then give our citizenry a chance, because I see the speaker is already, on her chair. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Let's listen to the minister.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Order. I know you were expecting me to say medication. No, it's not medication, it's meditation. Order, honorable members. The secretary will read the first to fifth orders together.
Medium-term budget policy statement, introduction of the Adjustments Appropriation Bill, introduction of the Special Appropriation Bill, introduction of the Rates and Monetary Amounts and Amendment of Revenue Laws Bill, and introduction of the Taxation Laws Amendment Bill.
I now recognize the Honorable, the Minister of Finance.
Honorable Speaker, His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, Deputy President David Mabuza,
Order.
Cabinet colleagues.
Order, order. I'm sorry, Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, will you be seated? Honorable members. No. Honorable members. Honorable members. Honorable members who have placards in the House.
I can continue.
Will you please take your seats, lower the placards and take your seat.
On a point of order, Speaker.
Honorable member.
On a point of order, Speaker. On a point of order,
Minister,
Speaker.
please take your seat.
On a point of order.
Honorable Shivambo.
Speaker.
Honorable Shivambo, you have the floor.
Speaker, in terms of the rules of the National Assembly, we are permitted to display placards
Sound.
in protest.
Sound. Honorable Shivambo.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Now, I was saying in terms of the rules of the National Assembly, we are permitted as members of Parliament to display placards in protest or in communication of certain messages. And that is exactly what members of Parliament of the economic freedom fighters are doing, to send a clear message to the person who is presenting the MTBPS today, of what we are communicating in the placards now. So there is absolutely nothing wrong that members of parliament of the economic freedom fighters are doing currently. It is our right. We've been elected to do whatever we wish to do, as long as that is within the confines of the rules of the National Assembly. And that is exactly.
Except that you are not audible, Honorable Shivambu.
I can start from scratch.
No, don't start. Start where you left off.
I was saying that you can't instruct the members of parliament to lower the placards because it is permitted in terms of the rules of the National Assembly to display pamphlets in the sittings of the National Assembly. That is a fact. You can check that with the table staff. They'll confirm exactly what we're saying.
Honorable Shivambu, are you objecting to the fact that I've called for a point of order? The point of order I am raising, one, is the fact that you are up on your feet and you are holding placards inside the chamber.
So, Speaker, what we can do, we'll sit down.
Will you please take your seat,
We'll
Honorable
sit down, but the
Shivambu?
placards are going to remain up because such is permitted in terms of the rules of this House. That must be clear in terms of how we proceed.
Honorable Khatebe. Honorable Khatebe.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I'm rising on the rule that we know very well that the rules of parliament do not allow the party political logos inside the House. So those placards are having party political logos. So I think that they are out of order. They must be ruled upon. Thank you.
Honorable Khatebe, will you please repeat yourself? Members, before I have ruled against what you are doing, you will not be allowed to make noise here. Yes, I am requesting you and I'm appealing to you to maintain order and the decorum of the House. Yes, Honorable Khatib.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I'm rising on a point of order that the party political regalia or logos cannot be displayed in the House of Parliament. Number two, there is no rule which says that the placards can be raised up in the House. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, honorable members.
Thank you very much, Speaker. The point of order that has been raised by the
Take
member.
your seat. I did not give you the floor. Take your seat and ask for a point of order. Take your seat. Hlala phansi.
Please recognize.
Hlala phansi.
Please recognize. Speaker.
Take your seat.
Thank you very much, Speaker.
Honorable members, just take note that I will not, Mautwe, honorable members, uzawuphuma. I don't know if you guys are happy with being thrown out every day from the chamber. I don't know if that is what you want. Honorable Mautwe, Honorable Tambo, sit down. Pembo, sit down. Take your seat. Take your seat. And behave like an honorable member. Nizawukhupha. Nizawuphuma one by one. Now, I recognize you, Honorable Pembo.
Thank you very much, Speaker. the starting point was that the point of order that was raised by the member who rose to say that we as the economic freedom fighters were raising logos and so on is mute because there's no logo that you can see here. No starting point. There's no starting point. Speaker, can I be protected? That's the starting point. But the other point of order, Speaker, the other point, Speaker, is that you, when you were calling me to order, of which I concede, that is the starting point, is that you used unparliamentary affiliation of saying "Nca." That is absolutely wrong. I accept that you can say to me, you can't stand in this parliament without being recognized. But the fact that you can take a platform sitting there, and we have said this to you, that you can't do what you're doing. Say to us, sit down, you have not been recognized. But to say "Nca" is an expression of your impatience for us and your attitude.
Speaker, order.
Speaker.
Take your seat. You've made your point, honorable members.
My point is not
the
made.
Speaker withdraws "Nca." I do not recall using it, but I am withdrawing "Nca." Shall we proceed, please?
My point is this point, Speaker. Speaker.
Kotongwana, take the floor.
Speaker,
You've made your point.
no,
take
Speaker,
your seat.
The point is that the order on the EFF is mute.
Take your seat.
There is no logo of the EFF that
Take
stands
your
here
seat.
now, right now. The
Take your
placard
seat.
stands as we speak now. Thank you very much.
Take your seat. Thank you. Honorable members, we proceed. Honorable Kotongwane, Minister, please take the floor and proceed with your speech. Please.
I said, Madam Speaker, His Excellency, the President of the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency Deputy President, colleagues, cabinet ministers, members of the Executive Council for Finance, honorable members, the Governor of the South African Reserve Bank, the Commissioner of the South African Revenue Services, fellow South Africans. I'm honored to table the following documents before this House. The 2022 Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, the 2022 Adjustment Appropriation Bill, the Special Appropriation Bill, the 2022 Rates and Monetary Amounts and Amendments of Revenue Laws Bill, the 2022 Taxation Laws Amendment Bill, the 2022 Tax Administration Laws Amendment Bill, the Revised Fiscal Framework, the 2022 Adjusted Estimate of National Expenditure, the 2022 Medium-Term Budget Policy Statement. Madam Speaker, the strategic goal of this government is to reduce poverty, inequality, unemployment in pursuit of better life for all. It was former President Nelson Mandela who reminded us that, and I quote, democracy will have little content and indeed will be short-lived if we cannot address our socio-economic problems within an expanded and growing economy. South Africa's economy is underperformed for many years. Several long-standing structural impediments continue to hamper growth. These include unreliable electricity supply, costly and inefficient ports and rail networks, crime and corruption, weak state capacity, and high levels of material concentration and barriers to entry that suppress the emergence and growth of small business. These challenges undermine our efforts to create jobs, contributing to high levels of poverty and inequality. Our structural challenges have been exacerbated by new ones, including global economic slowdown, high energy and food prices, the destruction caused by natural disasters such as the recent floods. The 2022 medium-term budget policy statement aims to address the needs of South Africans and secure our future stability and prosperity. It provides for spending adjustment to continue rebuilding lives and infrastructure following devastating flood damages earlier this year. It restores fiscal strength and rebuilds fiscal space despite the unfavorable economic backdrop. It enhances the quality of public service such as education and health. It also prioritizes the safety and security of our people and invests in future growth by increasing funding for critical infrastructure. Madam Speaker, let me now turn to the economic outlook. Many of the risks we outlined in the February 2022 budget speech have materialized. Globally, these include rising inflation, tightening financial conditions, and the ongoing effect of COVID-19, including more stringent lockdown in China and their impact on global demand and supply chains. These were made worse by the outbreak of the Russian-Ukraine conflict. As a result, the IMF global growth forecast for 2022 has been revised downward from 4.4% to 3.2%, and the 2023 estimate from 3.8% to 2.7%. This means that the global environment will be less supportive of our growth than we anticipated at the time of the budget. The outlook contains many risks, notably further slowing global growth and high inflation and the Russian-Ukraine conflict. There is also a possibility of energy rationing in Europe that will impact on global energy prices and output. A further decline in Chinese economic growth could slow global demand and add pressure to global supply chains, while the tightening of monetary policy could slow global output even further. These are significant risks in the global environment. In this context, small open economies like ours need to be especially careful and have solid fiscal buffers in place to weather the coming storms. Domestically, the robust pace of economic recovery in early 22 was derailed by floods in various parts of the economy, particularly KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape. Industrial action in key sectors and widespread power cuts. We now expect real GDP growth to be 1.9% in 2022, compared with an estimated 2.1% in February. Over the next 2 years, the economy is expected to grow at an average of 1.6%. This level of growth is too low to support our developmental goals. Accordingly, we must take action to put our economy on a higher growth trajectory. Our approach to growth is based on clear and stable macroeconomic framework, complemented by the implementation of structural reforms to improve competitiveness, industrial policy to boost manufacturing, and measures to strengthen the capacity of the state. Key elements of our macroeconomic are stable and flexible exchange rate, low and stable inflation, and sustainable fiscal policy. Since the budget in February, we have accelerated the implementation of structural reforms to address binding constraints on economic growth and support investment and job creation. Madam Speaker, the intensity of load shedding is having a disastrous effect on our economy. We have therefore focused on our efforts on reforms in the electricity sector. Several policies and regulatory changes aimed at creating a competitive energy market are also underway. These include the removal of the licensing threshold for embedded generation projects, where the pipeline has grown to 100 projects, representing over 9,000 megawatts of capacity. The Electricity Regulation Amendment Bill has been finalized. It provides for the establishment of an independent transmission and a systems operator. which will fundamentally transform the electricity sector, reducing South Africa's reliance on a simply monopoly utility and unlocking massive new private sector investment in generation capacity will contribute significantly to long-term energy security. Madam Speaker, there is a crisis in our logistics sector. Inefficiencies in port and rail are costing the economy billions and further undermine our efforts to raise growth. We welcome the end of the strike, Transnet strike, and are working with Transnet leadership and all stakeholders to urgently address the challenges in the sector. Several steps are being taken to introduce greater competition and efficiency into ports and railway. The National Assembly has passed the Economic Regulation of Transport Bill. It will establish independent transport regulator to encourage greater competition and enable regulated access to the network. In addition, requests for proposal have been issued for third-party access to the freight rail network and private sector participation for the Durban Port Pier 2 and Ngquha container terminals. In the telecommunications sector, the auction of high-value broadband spectrum has been completed. The next step is to complete digital migration to release frequency. The Minister of Communication and Digital Technologies will shortly indicate a new date for analog switch off. In the water sector, we have accelerated the backlog of water use licenses. The process to establish a water regulator through the National Water Resource Infrastructure Agency Bill is also on track. This agency will enable effective management of bulk water infrastructure and facilitate private sector investment. The review of the work of the work visa system has been completed with recommendations to attract skills and investment. Honorable members, these reforms are not the totality of our reform agenda. More must and can be done to unleash dynamism of our economy. Key to this is the need for a capable developmental state. Madam Speaker, a strong and capable state is a necessary precondition for growth. The state is responsible for creating and maintaining an enabling environment for growth and investment. It provides basic services and promotes the rule of law. To do this effectively, the state needs to be responsive to societal needs, prioritize, sequence, and coordinate interventions through institutions that are accountable and capable. Leveraging fixed investment is a critical part of our achieving sustainable and inclusive growth. It supports economic recovery, raises the economic potential, and creates jobs. We have seen gross fixed capital formation contract on average by 4.4% annually between 2016 and 2020, from a peak of 796 billion in 2025. The contraction has been broad-based. Private sector investment, which accounts for nearly 2/3 of total fixed investment, as well as the public sector, have both declined. We seek to reverse these trends by tackling impediments to investment. In the private sector, policy uncertainty, constraints to the ease of doing business, along with the high cost of doing business, are often cited as key constraints to investment. Our clear and stable macroeconomic progress on structural transformation, supporting enabling growth, will go a long way to removing impediments to investment. They will also boost confidence and create an enabling environment for the private sector to invest. With respect to public sector investment, state-owned enterprises have an important role to play in the provision of critical economic goods and services in the economy. Addressing this supply constraint, particularly in the energy and transport sectors, is critical to support higher and sustainable economic growth. On general government, we are increasing on-budget infrastructure allocations to remedy the erosions of baselines. Over the medium term, government consolidated its spending on building new and rehabilitating existing infrastructure will increase from 66.7 billion in 2022-23 to 112.5 billion in 2025-26. This includes roads, bridges, stormwater system, and public buildings. This makes spending on capital assets by the fastest growing item by economic classification. By delivering on public sector investment, will crowd in private sector investment, improve public service provision, and address backlogs, thus ignite a vicious cycle of high investment, growth, and employment potential. We are also committed to improving state capacity, project planning, preparation, procurement practices, and contract management. This will address the underspending of allocated infrastructure budgets, improve value for money and efficacy of our investment. Madam Speaker, climate change is reshaping the world around us, including our economic context. It poses physical risk to our people, infrastructure, the environment, and production of, including the critical goods such as food. The global response to climate must be coordinated. For our part, we are finalizing negotiations on the pledges by the International Partner Group for the Just Energy Transition. In addition, the investment plan supporting our energy transition was recently endorsed by Cabinet. We will take all necessary steps to ensure that our transition is just. Madam Speaker, when government finances are saddled with debt, it becomes very difficult to meet our developmental objectives. For nearly 15 years, the South African government has been tabling higher deficits. As a result, government debt is projected to be more than 4.7 trillion in our current financial year, compared to 627 billion in the year 2008-2009. This debt is incurring debt service cost that will average 354 billion per year over the medium-term expenditure framework. As already outlined, the global economy is slowing, inflation is increasing, financial markets are becoming more volatile. The result is that the debt service costs are estimated to be 5.9 billion higher in 2022-23 than it was thought at the time of the February budget. Moreover, the possibility of a major price correction in financial markets is a significant risk. This will affect fiscal revenues going forward. It is for this reason that the medium-term strategy needs to maintain a prudent approach to fiscal policy. We need to decrease our debt burden and debt service costs by reducing our annual deficit. This will stabilize public finances and reduce the fiscal risk. Honourable members, we are making progress in this regard. A consolidated fiscal deficit of 4.9% of GDP is projected in 2022-2023. This will decline to 3.2% of GDP by 2025-2026. A primary fiscal surplus of 0.7% of GDP will be achieved in 23-24. This is 1 year earlier than projected at the 2021 medium-term budget policy statement. We also now expect gross government debt to stabilize at 71.4% of GDP in 2022-23, 2 years earlier and at a lower level than projected in the 2022 budget review. Among other things, this means that we are proposing that no budget reduction are implemented in the 2023 budget. In fact, consolidated government spending will exceed 2.2 trillion this year and will rise to 2.5 trillion in 25-26. Turning to revenue, since the 2022 budget, revenue collection has exceeded projections and the gross tax revenue estimate for 2022-23 has been revised up by 83.5 billion to 1.68 trillion. The higher estimate is largely due to improvements in corporate income tax collections with strong receipts from the finance and manufacturing sectors. This is better than expected revenue collection estimates, including over the medium term, have allowed government to narrow the deficit and mitigate lingering and new risk. Equally, it allows us to gradually restore the baseline budgets of departments key to the delivery of services without making unaffordable permanent commitments. A portion of higher than anticipated revenue will be utilized as follows. First, reduce the deficit in the current financial year and over the MTF, make additions for infrastructure projects, critical public services such as education, health, and policing, addressing fiscal risks that were previously identified in February. These include higher than projected debt service costs, the public service wage bill, and the materialization of financial risk from some state-owned companies. Should any of the fiscal risks materialize, this could negatively affect the fiscal position and government's efforts to stabilize the public finances. Madam Speaker, we are allocating a net addition of 13 billion in spending adjustment for this 2022-23 financial year in the adjustment appropriation bill. The largest adjustment of that 13 billion is 6.3 billion, which is equal to 49% of the total, is allocated towards this disaster relief, especially the April flooding in several parts of the country. Other adjustment in the adjustment appropriation include 308 million for 24 rural bridges through a program called Willisizo Rural Bridges. I must explain, this amount is only for in-year. For the next outer years, we're penciling in for all provinces. This will cover only 2 provinces which are ready with their bridges, that is Eastern Cape and Limpopo. 500 million rand is also set aside to kick off the Home Affairs digitization program that will employ 10,000 young people over 3 years. 118 million is to deal with an interim allocation cost to prepare for the rebuilding of Parliament. I think I need to explain that because there are 2 amounts included in that. The first amount relates to how much Parliament is, I'm going to make the figure at the end, how much it will cost Parliament to rebuild it. And then how much between now and March can be allocated towards rebuilding Parliament. That amount is penciled in. The second amount in that 118 is an amount that says, in between as a result of the fire, Parliament has incurred additional costs it has not factored in, including offices, including this address today was not budgeted to be outside, it was budgeted to be in Parliament, not to be here. So Parliament is paying extra cost by being here. So you've got 2 amounts to get the technical work for the rebuilding. Secondly, for what is called unavoidable and unforeseen for Parliament. Honourable members, during the current financial year, wage negotiations have been taking place at the Public Service Coordinating Bargaining Council. On the 30th of August, 2022, government made a final offer which emanated from a facilitated process. Underline that. From a facilitated process, and a tentative agreement was reached and was tabled before the Bargaining Council. All parties undertook to go and seek mandates. Then the unions came back and said they do not have a mandate. But it must be understood that there was a tentative agreement facilitated. This offer includes the continuation of non-pensionable cash allowance for the current financial. This translates into an average of 1,000 rand per employee per month until March 2023. It also translates that cash control into 4.5% for the wage bill, and another pensionable salary increase of 3% for public servants. That together in total comes to 27.5%. Sibazamile. Madam Speaker, the offer on the table is the best interest of the fiscals and public service workers. Implementing it does not undermine the collective bargaining process. We believe that the facilitation process has helped all parties get to this point. Therefore, the spending estimates we are tabling today include this amount. This offer will be implemented through the payroll system and backdated to April 2022. Honorable members, our budget over the next 3 years is focused on restoring service delivery and laying the foundations for a higher growth. Medium changes to spending plans are driven mainly by government's decision to extend the special COVID-19 social relief distress grant by 1 year until 31 March 2024. The fiscal framework also includes funding for cadetry costs of the 2022-2023 public service increases, as well as for safety and security, infrastructure investment, and service delivery. The SRD grant was introduced in May 2022 as a temporary measure to respond to the needs of the most vulnerable who were affected by lockdown measures. It has been extended several times since then. Discussions on the future of the grant are ongoing and involve very difficult trade-offs and financing decisions. Despite the provision made in this budget, I want to reiterate that any permanent extension or replacement will require permanent increases in revenues, reduction in spending elsewhere, or a combination of both. Madam Speaker, this is what is meant by trade-offs, balancing the need to address one priority over another. Overall, consolidated government spending is projected to increase to 2.21 trillion in 2023, 2.48 in 25-26, at an average growth of 4%. The social wage totaling 3.56 trillion over the next 3 years, or put differently, 59.2% of the consolidated non-interest spending, will take up the biggest share of the budget in support of poor households and the most vulnerable in our society. The largest allocations are directed to the education, health, and social development sectors. Moreover, over the next 3 years, spending increases will be prioritized to improve investment in infrastructure and boost the budget for safety, security, and fighting corruption. Overall, government's consolidated capital spending will increase from 95.1 billion in 22-23 to 145 billion in 25-26. This excludes spending on state-owned enterprises. We are working closely with the presiding officers of Parliament to restore and rebuild Parliament. Over the medium-term expenditure framework, we have made allowances for approximately 2 billion for rebuilding of Parliament. Madam Speaker, over the next years, we will work with provinces and municipalities to make meaningful progress in achieving our developmental goals. Municipalities shape the living conditions of our people. They ensure that people have access to cleaning, drinking water, energy, housing, and sanitation. Yet several municipalities are dysfunctional, experiencing either financial or leadership crisis, reflected in a general inability to deliver services. Following a diagnostic review of the local government capacity building system, The National Treasury is coordinating with key stakeholders, including the Department of Cooperative Governance, SALGA, and provinces in the design of capacity building systems towards a more integrated and outcome-focused approach. Over the next 3 years, we propose allocation of 48.4% of available non-interest spending to national departments, 41.4% to provinces, and 10.1% to local government. This will allow provinces to support basic education and health services, roads, housing, social development, and agriculture. We're also allocating additional funds to local government to support the delivery of free basic services to poor households. Considering the rise of cost of the free basic service, as well as the rising bulk electricity and water costs, the 2023 budget review will provide more detail on these efforts. Madam Speaker, some of the state-owned companies represent critical components of our economic activity, especially in transport, engineering, and energy. These companies should be self-sufficient and must contribute to economic growth. Unfortunately, we face a situation where financial weaknesses caused in previous years by bad leadership and corruption still need to be resolved. Moreover, when unavoidable events such as the recent floods destroy infrastructure and assets, it puts the whole economy at risk. In the meantime, the road network must function, ports must operate, and critical technical projects cannot be halted. So, as balance sheets are being restored, and those who looted and mismanaged them are being held accountable, including through the criminal justice system, we have little choice but to act to keep these key services running. We are proposing to use higher than anticipated revenues in the current year to reduce risk from specific SOEs. These resources cannot be used to fund baseline increases as they are once off. Using them in this way will also not expand the fiscal deficit compared to our existing medium-term plans. The financial support to SOEs recognizes their potential to contribute to our long-term growth prospects. We are thus tabling a special appropriation bill to provide additional funding to Denel, Transnet, and Sandra. These allocations will allow these entities to adjust their business models and restore their long-term financial viability. Fiscal support to state-owned companies remains a challenging balancing act given the many competing priorities and limited resources. Funding to SOEs will now come with strict pre- and post-conditions. Pre-conditions mean that SOE will need to comply with these conditions before they receive government support, and not after. Non-compliance to conditions means no funding. Transnet is allocated 2.9 billion to ensure the return of out-of-service locomotives. This will be complemented by 2.9 billion from in-year spending adjustment to deal with flood damage that affected its operations in eThekwini. Denel is allocated 3.4 billion to support recent progress made to stabilize the entity. This allocation will be augmented by 1.8 billion in sale of non-core assets and will unlock committed order book of 12 billion awaiting execution. Honourable members, the uncertainty surrounding the Gauteng Improvement project continues to have a major negative implication for road construction in the country. We need to move on from the debates of previous years and find solution to this challenge. To resolve this funding impasse, the government, the Gauteng provincial government has agreed to contribute 30% to settling Sanral's debt and interest obligations, while national government covers 70% of this. Gauteng will also cover the cost of maintaining 201 kilometers and associated will the 201 kilometers and associated interchanges of the roads and any additional investment in road will be funded through their existing electronic toll infrastructure or new toll plaza or any other revenue source which within their area of responsibility. Let me just explain this because it became, okay, before that, let me do this. Government proposes to make an initial allocation of 23.7 billion from the national fiscus, which will be dispersed on strict conditions. Let me then explain, because there was something which, when I addressed the media, let me explain this thing. For 7 years, we've been battling with e-toll in Gauteng. And for all the political wrangling, it has had an impact on the balance sheet of SANRAL. What is the implication? Now, SANRAL can default any time. So we've agreed with Gauteng. Gauteng, take your toll, your roads. We will take the debt, a better portion of it, but you will contribute 30% of it. From then, Tina as national singaphandle ngebail uzihambela wedwa mntaseka. Moving forward, if you decide to maintain the roads, you as Gauteng, you can either toll to get the maintenance, or you can, from your own revenue, do something about that. So, say value it all from today in that sense. There are implications. There are implications. What are those implications? Gauteng is still yet going to do phase 2 of this project. It's going to be important that in doing phase 2, proper planning and thinking on how to fund phase 2 must take place. That's one of the implications we must have. It also has got implication on the user pay principle. Turning to Eskom, for at least a decade, we spent billions of rands supporting Eskom with limited improvements in the reliability of the electricity supply or the financial health of the company. To ensure Eskom's long-term financial viability, government will take over a significant portion of the utility's 400 billion debt. While the selection of the relevant debt instruments and the method of effecting the relief is still to be determined, the quantum is expected to be between 1/3 and 2/3 of Eskom's debt. The debt takeover, once finalized, together with other reforms, will ensure that Eskom is financially sustainable. This program will allow Eskom to focus on plant performance and capital investment and ensure that it no longer relies on permanent bailouts. Importantly, the program will include strict conditions required of Eskom and other stakeholders before and during the debt transfer. These conditions will address Eskom's structural challenges by managing the cost addressing the municipal and household debt due to the utility, and providing clear clarity on transparency and in tariff pricing. In addition, the conditions will be informed by Treasury-led independent review of Eskom operations, in particular the performance of its fleet. In other words, if I want to explain this thing, for us to be able to say to Eskom, these are the outcomes we require as we change debt, we need from ourselves to be informed. In that regard, we have said we want an independent review of people who are going to assist us to analyze what is happening in Eskom, so that we should be able to attach conditions which are appropriate. Further details of this program will be finalized following consultation with all relevant stakeholders and lenders and will be announced in the 2023 budget. Madam Speaker, I must say, we made a commitment in the budget that we'll provide more detail, including the quantum on this, or on this ESCOM. However, dealing with financial individuals is quite a complicated issue, President. Lenders are quite a difficult crowd to deal with. In the process of doing all of these things, trying to find out what the quantum should be, we've got to negotiate with the lenders. There are legal implications and so on and so on. But we're still committed to make our decision within the financial year, because in February we said within the financial year. We didn't say by the medium term. So we'll still make that commitment by the financial year in terms of giving the quantum. We are also adopting best practices in the procurement of goods and services, including the highest standard of transparency in the tendering process. Such modernization aims to simplify and speed up the process of public infrastructure projects while reducing the scope of looting and corruption. Here, the issue is, Dr. Ramkopa tells us that the underspending on infrastructure per annum is 43 billion rand. And largely of that relates to skills issue, corruption, regulatory framework which is problematic. Tight regulatory framework. I was addressing a meeting somewhere, somebody raised a hand and said, when are you going to stop Regulation 16, which is frustrating triple Ps? I didn't know about Regulation 16. I went back to the office to check what Regulation 16 does. It turns out it also makes people to triple Ps to take over a three-year period. So those minor things need to be removed from the system in order to make sure that procurement can be effective. We expect to introduce the public procurement bill, which will enhance transparency, integrity, and promoting the use of technology for efficiency and effectiveness in the public procurement, to Parliament by March 2023. Honorable Maswangai will bear with us. The government, in South Africa, there's a democratic process. The consultation process is beyond us. Just NEDLEC alone, I don't know how many months it took us in NEDLEC, but we're still committed to do it within this fiscal year. The new preferential procurement regulations of 2022, replacing the now invalid regulations of 2017, will be promulgated in November 2022 to be effective from the 16th of January 2023. The regulations empower organs of the state with the authority to determine their own preferential procurement policies within the ambit of the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act. I must add, yes, the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa says it is the organ of state that procures. It's the organ, every organ of state must have its own procurement policy, not be getting permission now and again from Treasury. So we're giving you that authority, each organ of the state to be able to have its own procurement policies. No one will then say, if I don't deliver on time on my project, I'm delayed by Treasury. Madam Speaker, earlier this week, President Ramaphosa announced government's response to the recommendations of the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. It committed government to a new chapter in our struggle against corruption, to advance the renewal of our society. It noted the need for the state to be ethical and free of corruption as it serves the needs and interests of the people. As noted by the Commission, to enable service delivery, we should protect honest accounting officers and authorities who make decisions in good faith from criminal prosecution and civil litigation. In this regard, we'll strengthen the auditing and preventive control of systems to enable managers to manage while putting mechanisms to hold them accountable. The Commission of Inquiry into the State Capture made recommendation aimed at strengthening the institutional governance and accountability mechanism. As has been done with Bain, we'll continue to take punitive administrative action against companies and individuals who have actively facilitated corruption and irregular activities. Madam Speaker, crime is a safe economic as well as a social issue. A safe environment is important for full participation in economic and social life. This makes fighting crime a key pillar of enhancing economic growth. Many South Africans' lives live in fear in their homes, in their places of work, and in places of recreation. In response, we are allocating additional resources to our security forces to take the fight to those that threaten peace, our peace as a nation. We'll support the police to recruit an additional 15,000 constables over the next 3 years. This is in addition to the current 10,000 they are recruiting this year. Honourable members, we are doing everything necessary to prevent grey listing by the Financial Action Task Force, the international standard-setting body that oversees global compliance with anti-money laundering rules. Already we've tabled 2 bills in Parliament aimed at addressing weaknesses in our legislative framework. The bills are expected to be enacted by the end of this year. This will be a significant step towards meeting the 40 recommendations made by the Financial Action Task Force. We are also required to implement laws on anti-money laundering and corruption more effectively. Investing in building the capacity of our regulatory and enforcement institution is already bearing positive results. These include the Investigating Directorate of the National Prosecuting Authority has enrolled 26 cases, declared 89 investigations, and 165 accused persons have appeared in court for alleged state capture-related offences. The Asset Forfeiture Unit has frozen or granted preservation orders to the value of 12.9 billion rand and returned a total of 2.9 billion to the affected entities. The SIU has instituted 4 High Court cases in relation to contracts worth 62.1 billion. And SARS investigations arising from the Commission's findings and evidence have resulted in collection of 4.8 billion in unpaid taxes. SARS is currently engaged in 18 projects involving 222 cases. 11 of those cases are recommendations explicitly for SARS to execute, and 8 have been finalized, and others are under investigation. The 2022 medium-term budget policy statement proposes additional resources to the budgets of the National Prosecuting Authority, the Special Investigation Unit, the Financial Intelligence Center, and the South African Revenue Services to further improve the capability of the state to investigate and prosecute sophisticated financial crimes. In addition, government will also publish a revised national risk assessment strategy on anti-money laundering and terror financing. Madam Speaker, let me conclude by reiterating what I said in the beginning of our democratic ideas. Will be given life and sustained by growing and inclusive economy. We cannot ignore the relation between democracy and the economy, and the relation between politics and inequality. We are fortunate to have a legal and policy framework backed by political vision that allows us to transform the economic conditions of our people and deliver on the promise of democracy. The medium-term budget policy statement reminds us of the urgent need to pursue the reform of our economy in our consistent manner and with the freedom of our people in mind. We should not take lightly the link that former President Nelson Mandela made and other leaders that drew between thriving economy and a fair and just society. This is the golden thread that this runs through our constitution. And in this medium-term budget policy statement, we should keep sight of this goal and the balancing act it entails as we do our work. Madam Speaker, I'm grateful to President Ramaphosa and Deputy President Mabuza for their support and leadership. And thank you to Deputy Minister of Finance and the National Treasury team, led by the Acting Director General. My sincere thanks to the Commissioner of the South African Revenue Service and the Governor of South African Reserve Bank. Of course, nonkosikazi noba akekho apha undijongile TV. Let me also thank my colleagues in the Ministers' Committee on the Budget and the Budget Council who have shared the load of tough decisions that have to be made. Similarly, the Parliamentary Committee of Finance and Appropriations. I express my sincere appreciation. Lastly, thank you to each and every South African, including you. I serve at your privilege. I thank you.
I thank the Honorable, the Minister. Honorable members, thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, thank you. Honorable members, members should at all times uphold the dignity and decorum of the House. Ours is a chamber of debate and not a forum for protest. It is here that we engage one another verbally with due regard and respect. While Rule 64E provides that members may not, amongst others, bring weapons to any kind of dangerous or threatening articles, it is silent on the holding of placards in the chamber. This is a matter that is currently under consideration by the Subcommittee on the Review of Rules. And I will ensure that the matter is brought to the Rules Committee at the earliest convenience. However, what is not in doubt is that you cannot use placards to insult one another. Our rules also apply to members, ministers, deputy ministers, even those who may not be members of Parliament. Order. The following members held up placards that are in breach of Rule 84 and 85. Honorable Mautwe, you've accused the minister of being a pervert. Honorable Chabangu and Honorable Makaula, you have accused the minister of being a sexual delinquent. Honorable Nolu Chungu, you've accused the minister of covering up for GBV. Honorable Ntlangwini and Honorable Hlonyana, you've accused, no, because I'm still on the floor and I'm ruling on a matter. I am ruling on a matter. Please take the floor, Honorable Shivambu. Now, Honorable Ntlangwini and Honorable Shonyana, you've accused the minister of bribing his way. Now, Rule 84, honorable members, but I'm ruling on a point of order. I am on a point of order. Take your seat, Honorable Shivambu, please. Honorable Shivambu, please take your seat. Take your seat, Honorable Shivambu. Honorable Tlakute.
Thank you, Honorable.
This is the thing.
Thank you. Am I?
Okay, take your seat, honorable member. Honorable members, I'm sure you are all aware that when the presiding officer is ruling on a matter, before the presiding officer has completed that process, you may not raise a point of order. You have noted that throughout the session, I actually restrained myself and made sure that I do not continue to engage those who have placards in this House. I was now ruling. It is for that reason, Honorable Shivambu, that I did not grant you the opportunity. Honorable Shivambu, we will not have a circus here now. What we will have is you will allow us to, Mautwe, honorable member, just behave like an honorable member. You behave like an honorable member. Now, honorable members, Rule 84, as I was saying, provides that no member may use offensive, abusive, insulting, disrespectful, unbecoming, unparliamentary words or language, nor offensive, unbecoming, or threatening gestures. Rule 85(2) provides that a member who wishes to bring any improper or unethical conduct on the part of another member may do so in the form of a separate substantive motion. The members, therefore, I have cited, I order you, honorable members, to lower your placards. I also will refer this behavior to the Rules Committee. Rule 64, honorable members, provides that members are required not to take photographs or video footage during proceedings. Honorable Tambo, you acted in breach of this rule. I order you to delete the photograph or video. I bring your attention also to Section 21 of the Powers and Privileges Act, which prohibits broadcasting or transmission by electronic means of proceedings of the House without the authority of the House. Should this not be done, you may be in breach of the Powers and Privileges Act. Honorable members, as you have not, those of you I have directed to withdraw the placards. You have not done so. I will now rule on this matter and propose a way forward at the next sitting of the House. The papers that have been delivered to us by the Minister will be referred to the relevant committees. Honourable members, order. That now concludes the business of the House, and the House is adjourned.
This book, our Constitution, protects our society and empowers us to govern. The Protea leaves are us, the people, who freely elect our voices in Parliament. The drum calls the people of Parliament, through whom we govern together. And the sun is our country, healing our past, improving our lives, and energizing our potential. Together, our Constitution, our people, our Parliament, and our country are building our great South African nation. Parliament TV, Channel 408 on DSTV.
The budget reflects the choices that government has to make, and it is the tool it uses to achieve its economic and development goals. In the budget, government sets out what it's going to spend and the income it collects, which it needs to finance its expenditure. The government has to balance a wide range of legitimate demands with limited resources at its disposal. Budget oversight is intended to help government move forward to realize its goals by increasing government's accountability to its citizens. The budget process occurs over a period of about 18 months. The budget of any financial year undergoes a 4-stage process. The stages are drafting, planning and formulation, the legislative process, implementation, as well as auditing and assessment. Parliament and government departments plan the budget for months in advance for the following year, implementing the current budget while continuously monitoring it for delivery and compliance with policy, and evaluating and auditing the previous year's budget. During the legislative phase of the budget, the National Assembly, the National Council of Provinces, and the provincial legislatures debate budget votes with the involvement of interest groups